So, welcome to Cho's annual progress report session. My name is June Mather. I serve on the board of Christian Homeschoolers of Hawaii. My husband Dan and I homeschooled our 4 children from the beginning all the way through high school. Our youngest graduated in 2009, so we're kind of old, but it's just a blessing to share information about homeschooling and encourage families who begin and help them continue their journey for homeschooling. I'm not sure if Laura Burbage will be joining us. She's actually on the mainland, but she was going to join us, and she also graduated her 4 children a number of years ago. Laura and her husband Gary served on the Cho board as well, but they were also very, very instrumental in securing our homeschool law that is pretty much intact since the ruling came in 1988. So praise the Lord for our freedoms to homeschool. So you can turn on your video. You'll be muted during the session. You can write your questions in the chat. We'll answer them as we go along in different parts of the session and also during a Q&A session. So let's begin with prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you for all who are here. I thank you, Father, for the privilege we have to homeschool our children in Hawaii. I pray, Father, for your blessings upon our session tonight, that the information can be encouraging and clear to answer any questions that these families may have. Pray, Father, that I may present it in a way that gives you honor and glory. And we thank you that you have made all these things possible because of your great grace and mercy to us through Jesus Christ, our Savior. So we ask your blessings now. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So a lot of you don't have your, oh, there's Laura. Laura waves so everybody can see because I just told them who you are. Wave, that's Laura. She and her husband were on the Cho board, and like I said, we're very instrumental in securing our homeschool law that we have now. So a lot of people don't have their videos on, but for those of you who do, how many of you are new homeschoolers, maybe just 1 year? Ooh, okay. 3 years. Okay. Veterans, like 3, 4, 5 years. Okay. All right. Well, like I mentioned earlier, I saw that some of you had included in your registration the grades of your children. So I know there's a lot of kindergartners. I know there's children who would be in the testing years, and we have some even all the way through into the high school years. So what we're going to be doing this evening is we're going to start with going over the law so you know what the law requires. And then we're going to talk about standardized testing. And then we're going to be talking about another option for annual progress reports, and that's the written parent evaluation. So what does the law say? If you have a copy of the law, that'll be helpful because I will be making reference to it. But section 812.18 of Hawaii's homeschool law, which is chapter 12, compulsory attendance exceptions. 812.18 is a section on testing and progress reports of homeschool children. And it begins with the statement that test scores are required for grades 3, 5, 8, and 10. That's the statewide testing program years when those grades are tested. Now, according to the law, your child can test in the public school. And if that is your preference, then you, the parent, are responsible for securing the information when the school does their testing. That being said, a lot of schools might already contact you with a letter informing you of their testing schedules. But if you don't hear from them, it is your responsibility to find out. The section also states that parents can arrange for private testing as well. And that's going to be at your expense. But many parents choose this option because it gives them freedom with their own homeschool schedule. Also, the testing environment might be a little bit more child-friendly because it's in the home or it's with people that your child knows. But that's up to you what might work best for you. What tests can be administered? According to the law, the tests need to be comparable to the DOE's Criterion or Norm Reference Test. And we'll explain this when we actually talk about the standardized achievement test. Now, there is a clause in the law that states that parents may request another means of evaluation to meet the statewide testing program requirements, but this is with the principal's approval. If this is your situation, you can email Cho and we can discuss some specific options or some general options actually. 81218 goes on to state that parents shall submit to the principal an annual progress report of the child's progress. Now, many of you may have already received a letter or may be receiving a letter soon that this annual progress report is due by the end of May, because that's when the DOE school year ends. But Hawaii's homeschool law does not stipulate when the annual progress report needs to be submitted. So if you get one of these letters from the school, Cho just suggests that you respond in writing to their request and just give them a ballpark figure as to when you plan to submit your report. We are not required to follow the DOE school schedule. So, maybe your school year won't end till June, or some people might go all the way through July, or it just depends when you started and when you finish. So just kindly respond with a letter saying that, my progress report will be turned in the end of August or end of July, whatever when you think it'll be done. And then if possible, just try and send your progress report around the same time every year so they can kind of expect it and know that, you're diligent in what you're doing. Okay. You have several options for this annual progress report. Option 1 is scores from a nationally normed standardized achievement test. And like I said, we're going to be discussing this later in a few minutes. Option 2 is progress on a nationally normed standardized achievement test that is equivalent to 1 grade level per calendar year. Now, this sounds kind of similar, but this was written to accommodate struggling learners or kids who are not at specific grade level. So this is an option as well. Option 3 is a written evaluation by a person certified to teach in the state of Hawaii. So if you know a teacher certified to teach in Hawaii who's homeschool friendly, an auntie or relative or somebody, you might want to consider this option. And so it's important that you keep records during your school year for you to share with this teacher. I think, Laura, you use this option, the teacher evaluation?
I use the certified teacher.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And can you just tell what you had to do for this? Because I'm not going to go into much detail in this at all.
Okay, so I went ahead and ordered the tests. The tests were sent directly to the teacher that I was asking to help me. So he's a good friend. He would come over and we'd set up the testing times. He would come over to my house and I would leave. I didn't want to be there. And, and he was a good friend from our church. So it was a familiar face. So my kids didn't feel, hesitant about asking a question if they needed to ask about something. And it was in a familiar environment, which was my home. So the kids weren't distracted with everything that's new and, new face or whatever. So I felt like I took out as many variables as I possibly could to get the best results. Then once all the testing was over, he packaged it up, gave it to me, and then I paid to mail it. The results came directly to me. And this was through BJU, Bob Jones University testing.
Okay, so you actually did testing rather than a teacher evaluating. Yeah.
Sorry, testing, SAT test, not the evaluation. Sorry.
All right.
Mhm.
Option 4 is a written evaluation from a parent. And the rule, it does indicate that this written evaluation is to include a description of the child's progress in the subject areas taught, representative samples of the child's work, representative tests and assignments, including grades if grades are given. And we're going to be discussing this at length also after we talk about standardized achievement tests. Okay, still on the law, before we get to specific things about the test, when you submit your test scores as required in grades 3, 5, 8, and 10, these test scores will serve as your annual report. So you don't have to submit something else instead. So in other words, you could test every year if you wanted to, and these test scores would be your annual report, and it would also be in the years that testing is required, okay? This final section about testing might scare some people, but it does say the principal should review the adequacy of a child's progress. If progress, I'm just reading directly from the rule, if progress is not adequate, the principal shall meet with the parent to discuss the problems and help establish a plan for improvement. The principal may request and the parent shall share their record of the child's planned curriculum. So again, keeping good records is important. When standardized test scores are used, adequate progress shall be considered to be scores or stanines in the upper 2/3 of the scores or stanines. And that's when you take a standardized test, the scores usually come, I mean, they don't show you, but there's like a bell curve. And so your child would be scoring in the upper 2/3 of the bell curve. If you use standardized tests and you use the testing services that we're going to mention later on, the testing service will be able to explain to you the scores and what they mean. Unless progress is inadequate for 2 consecutive semesters based on a child's scores on the norm reference test for that grade level or the written evaluation by a person certified to teach in the state of Hawaii, recommendations to enroll the child in a public or private school or take legal action for educational neglect shall be prohibited. So if your child tests and it doesn't do well, the principal calls you in and you show them what you've been doing, they really can't touch you, take your child away, recommend another program, I mean, private school or public school, unless unless progress is not taking place for 2 consecutive semesters. So that's another year, okay? Has this ever happened? I am aware of a case that happened quite a number of years ago. And part of it was the mom wasn't diligent in teaching regularly. But so if you are, there really shouldn't be a problem. And as Christians, we should be diligent in educating our children and training them in the word. So. And then the final point in this section is no recommendations will be made for child before the 3rd grade. So if you do testing and the child's not doing very well in 2nd grade, they can't really do, because child development, children progress at so many different levels up to in the early grades anyway. So this is good. So bravo to Laura for making sure that this part of the law was included. Laura knew what she was doing. So let's talk about standardized tests. But before that, any questions about the law itself? Okay, this is pretty much the law that we have had from 1988, and Lord willing, it'll stick around. So does my child really need to take tests? And I guess yes, because that's what we just said, according to the Chapter 12 rule. And so it satisfies the requirement for the tests that are required in grades 3, 5, 8, and 10, and also for your annual reports. And I want to just take some time to explain some terms. They talk about Criterion or norm reference test. A criterion test, and I don't know why they chose these particular tests, but a criterion test assesses a student's performance on a pre-established or fixed standard. So what a student is expected to know based on the curriculum used. So a criterion test would be something like the chapter test of your math program. The child was supposed to know this, and then the test is checking to see if they learned it. Okay. A norm reference test is compares a student's knowledge to the knowledge of a norm group. And this would be a large number of students who were given these tests at specific grade levels. And then they took those scores and they made up a norm. So this is what this group of students should know at this grade level, what this group of students should know at this late grade level. So these are nationally normed tests that I'll be talking about. So they're tests that the norms have come from students all across the United States. A standardized achievement test, a standardized test is when it's administered, scored, and analyzed in the same consistent way for all the test takers. So everybody has the same test questions. If it's timed, they have the same time limits upon them. There's a range of when you can take this test for what particular grade. Is it the early part of first grade or is it the later part of first grade? So that makes it standardized. It's an achievement test because you're measuring the skills and abilities on particular subject matter at a particular time to determine academic progress. It's different from the aptitude test. So sometimes we get confused between the Stanford Achievement Test, which is the test that we're talking about, and the Stanford Aptitude Test, which is a college entrance exam. And that's testing your ability to learn. So completely different. So one way that we distinguish between SAT College and SAT for our purposes is we would call it the SAT 10 because that's the current test that's now we're using. Now you may have questions or concerns about having your child take a test, and there's actually, some benefits. It's an objective assessment of your child's academic performance. It measures your child's knowledge on the subjects tested, and in that sense, it's kind of subjective because somebody has determined that children in this particular grade should know this. This is common knowledge for them. How it was decided, I do not know, but somebody decided it. If you're using the same test every year, it can measure year-to-year progress, and that can be helpful. The test scores may help you identify areas of strength. It might also help you identify areas of weakness and therefore help you with your curriculum choices, or maybe you need to focus on something or do something extra or slower or whatever. And of course, the test meets the Chapter 12 requirements. And besides, who doesn't like filling in bubbles? You all remember taking those tests, right? Where you had to fill in those bubbles and they made you feel bad to not get any scratch mark outside those little lines. So, but that being said, nationally normed standardized achievement tests have their limits. They may not assess abilities or skills that you have taught specific or particular to your homeschool. And that, one of the freedoms of homeschooling is being able to teach what your family is interested in, what your family, your child might have some strengths in. So you might spend a lot of time in something and not do that common knowledge that they're expected for a specific grade. So when your child takes its test, they may not do so well. So that being said, you need to be aware of that. If you're teaching with a biblical worldview, the questions and the answers may be biased. And this would be particularly so for the areas of science or even some social studies questions. And then there's the young child. There's childhood experts or advocates suggest delaying formal testing for children under age 8 or grade 3. Children, in this age from kindergarten to second, third grade vary so much in their academic development that some of them may not be ready for formal testing. And maybe you've delayed it for your child. And so you can always do a written evaluation to meet the annual progress report requirements. And so that we are going to be covering that as well. So the point is, keep a realistic and healthy perspective on your child's test scores. The test is just a tool, and the scores are just, a snapshot of your child's academic progress. And you need to be aware, hopefully your child's not sick or not coming down with something. So, we get nervous. We want our children to do well, but, just we need to trust the Lord and that we've been diligent in teaching our children, and they will do well. So where can I test my child? I did mention that according to the law, you can test your child at the public school, and you need to it's your responsibility to find out when the testing is. With COVID, I don't know what's going on in the schools right now, so I don't know what they're doing. But you can also arrange for private testing. And again, I said that this is at your own expense, and it might allow for a more friendly environment. Like Laura said, she tested someone from their church that I assume the kids were familiar with him. She tested in their home where there wouldn't be all these distractions. So these kinds of things contribute. It will help the child feel relaxed and comfortable in the testing situation. So what tests are accepted by the Department of Education? Well, praise the Lord, they don't tell us which ones you can or cannot use. Per report, however, parents have submitted scores from a number of tests, and I'll be talking about them. The cost of the test may vary depending on the test and the testing service used. And so the 3 popular nationally normed standardized achievement tests are Stanford 10, Iowa Assessment, Form E, used to be called Iowa Test of Basic Skills, and Terra Nova 2, which is also called the CAT, or California Achievement Test 6. So let me tell you a little bit about these tests. Stanford 10 is a nationally normed standardized achievement test. It's available for grades K through 12. Oh, and also don't have to write any of this down. All of this information can be found on the CHO website under resources, under standardized achievement tests. Anyway, so this one is Stanford 10 is available for grades K to 12. It's untimed, and it covers reading, language arts, math, social science, and social studies. And there might be some breakdown within these major subject areas. The Iowa test, Iowa assessment, is also a nationally normed standardized test. This one is also available for grades K through 12. It's also untimed and covers the same subject areas: reading, language arts, math, science, and social studies. Terra Nova 2, or the CAT 6, is a nationally normed reference test for grades K to 12. The test is timed. This one is timed and covers the same things: reading, language arts, math, science, and social studies. This is one test that parents can administer themselves. No bachelor's degree is required. And the test is the updated California Achievement Test. Dan, can you put the chart up? My husband, my tech assistant, is putting up a comparison chart here. And so now I can't use my mouse. Okay, so there are several testing services. I've only named 3 because these are the better known, better used one. If you look at the bottom of the chart, it's BJU testing, Seton testing, family learning, And so these are the three. Each testing service offers one or more of these tests in one or more formats. So if you look at the SAT 10 paper booklet, that's offered by BJU as a paper booklet. It's also offered online, not by BJU, but by Seton Testing and Family Learning. But if you look at the chart, it online is only for grades 3 to 10. So this can get all kind of confusing, but that's why I put this chart together. So depending on the particular test, the test format, or the testing service, test administrators may need a college degree. If you look at BA or BS degree required for SAT 10 paper booklet, a degree is required, and the test administrator must be qualified with BJU Press. There's a process for becoming a qualified test administrator. For the online test, the SAT 10 online, notice that there's no degree required because the testing service provides the test administrator. So every test, it'll vary depending what service you use and what kind of test it is. BJU Press in particular requires test administrators to be pre-qualified by them. For online tests, I mentioned testing service provides the test administrators. And then depending on the test, parents may test their own child. And this is even for if you are a qualified test administrator with BJU, you can test your own child under if certain requirements are met. If you look at Terra Nova 2, there's no requirements. If you look under the Iowa assessment paper booklet, a degree is preferred, but not required. So some of this also depends on who is the test publisher. And we are just, BJU, Seton, and Family Learning is just making these tests available to families, homeschooling families. The costs of these tests, I didn't put them down because it varies per testing service. It varies depending on which test. It might even vary depending on the grade level of your child. And each of these tests have different deadlines for ordering, for scheduling, and administering the test will vary depending on the testing service. I did not look too closely, but you might check on the online testing because they might, because you're using a test administrator who is on the mainland, testing times may not be the most convenient for us in Hawaii. So you might keep in mind. I know BJU is on the East Coast. I think Seton is also, Family Learning might be West Coast. So that might be something that time-wise might work better for you if you do something online. Okay, any questions so far on testing? Okay, let's see. If you select a paper booklet test, you're actually renting the test. So you will need to adhere to the deadlines for ordering, for administering the test, and returning the test. And I'd like to make special note that this year, if you use Bob Jones University BJU Press homeschooling testing services, their paper booklet test, the test must be ordered by April 15th, 2022. The test must be administered by May 10th. And then they must be returned postmarked no later than June 1st. And if you go to the website, that information's up there if you choose to use a paper pencil test, because I think they're the only ones that do the paper booklet test for SAT. They're also the only, and because it's paper booklet, they will do it from kindergarten through grade 12. If you notice, the online ones are only from 3rd grade to 12th grade. So these are, a lot of things you have to think about. It's easier if you have several children and you can just use one testing service, and then you can use the testing service, or at least take the same test year after year. So some things to keep in mind. There might be some other testing services. I just mentioned three of the more popular ones, but most services in all these three do offer practice tests for you to help you to help your child get acquainted with what standardized testing is like. And they have contact numbers or consultants to help you understand the test scores. So take the time to investigate and to help and to determine which test is most appropriate for your child. Visit the CHO website, and under resources, you can refer to standardized achievement tests. And then you can also see that test comparison chart again. And then of all things, just visit the testing service website and even talk to their consultants before you make your decision, because you want to make a right decision and in how what you decide for your child. Any questions about tests? Good. Okay. And this information by CHO is just for your information, and we're not endorsing any test or any testing service. We just want to help you get the information out. So if there's no questions, we're going to go into the written evaluation by the parent. Again, it's important for you to know the rule. Several sections back in section 8.12.15, we are supposed to keep records of our curriculum. The subject areas for elementary school, it says may include language arts, math, social studies, science, art, music, health, and physical education. Secondary education may include social studies, English, math, science, health, physical education, and guidance. And now the section on testing, which we went over earlier, says that if you do a written evaluation, you're supposed to include a description of the child's progress, representative samples of the child's work, and representative tests and assignments, including grades if grades are given. Now, most families I know, and I included, always seem to go back to giving tests because it just seems to be a lot easier rather than getting all this information together and putting something together. When I homeschooled our kids, kindergarten wasn't required, wasn't mandatory yet. So for the first grade and second grade, our family chose to submit written evaluations because we didn't feel that we wanted to have our children tested just yet. In second grade, actually, though, we did test our children when they turned second grade, just so that they would become familiar with the testing situation. And we had our aunties test our children, so our children, knew the aunties from the church very well. So it was a very comfortable situation for them. But that being said, we didn't test our children in first and second grade, and I'm pretty sure I wouldn't do that for kindergarten, but that is your choice. There are limited options for you when you look at that comparison chart as well. Okay, so if you are going to do a written evaluation, by all means begin with prayer. The Lord has seen you through a homeschool year. It has its ups, it has its downs, but He's the one who's seen you through. And so, ask Him to help you put everything together and accurately evaluate your child. Okay, prose or outline. Well, Hawaii's homeschool law does not give specifics on how the report is to be written. You can therefore provide the information in prose paragraph form or outline form. I chose the outline form, and the advantage of that is that it's like bullet points. And the information is very easy to read. I didn't have to worry about grammar or sentence structure. It was just points I could put down. The length, again, the law doesn't say how long it has to be. So maybe for each subject area, maybe consider 4 to 6 skills that your child has accomplished at the end of the school year. That being said, maybe your report will take 1 to 2 pages, more like 1.5 pages at the most if it's an older student. So it's not, it doesn't have to be very lengthy, and it's a snapshot of what your child's able to do. Your goal is to be clear, accurate, and concise. Okay. If you need help with, what kinds of skills to put down in the different subject areas, there's a couple of resources out there. One is called What Your Second Graders Should Know, or What Your Third Graders Should Know. These books, I think, are still available in the library, and they're part of the Core Knowledge series by Dr. Hirsch, Hirsh. And again, this information is on our website under resources, tips for a written evaluation by the parent. Another good resource is this book, What Your Child Needs to Know When by Robin Sampson. She has a particular educational approach, but she does list objectives for grades K through 8 in different subject areas, language arts, math, social studies, science, and she even breaks up math into different aspects of mathematics. Same thing with language arts. She breaks it down into different aspects of language arts, which would include like the reading, the writing, the spelling, things like that. So this is a good resource to have, and it goes to K through 8. If you don't have to have these resources. If you want to, you can just select key or major skills or concepts. For example, in language arts, depending on the grade of your child, you might want to describe the progress in reading, language mechanics, spelling, listening, maybe for math, computation, measurement, problem solving, things like that. Look at the curriculum itself too. Your curriculum will have a table of contents, and it will tell you what your child is going to be learning or accomplishing, each chapter. It'll also, some curriculum even have objectives, what your child is supposed to be able to do. You can also look at a scope and sequence of what a child is able to do. If you even Google scope and sequence for grade 1 or for language arts, you might want to come up with something. A lot of it is written in teacher language, so it might be hard to decipher. So the best thing is just to use what you have at home with your programs. Okay. If you're teaching a unit study, for example, on the solar system, yes, you're teaching all these things and you think, okay, what do I want my kid to know at the end of our unit here? And for him to maybe name the planets. Okay, a child can name the planets and give 1 or 2 facts about each planet. That's something you can write down. So it really doesn't have to be that complicated.
You're really not needing to write a book.
Yeah.
Just short little snippets per subject. Yeah. And the scope and sequence, every publisher puts out a scope and sequence. So what are they going to accomplish? And very succinctly for this, subject, for that subject. By the end of the year, your child will be able to blah, blah, blah. So that's a good one too, the scope and sequence from the publishing company.
Also consider the sequence of learning. And this, I say this to help you be brief. So you're going to keep in mind the end product, the end goal, rather than a series of incremental steps. So let me explain what I mean by that. For example, a child learns to add 2-digit numbers without regrouping, or a child learns to add single digit numbers before he learns to add 2-digit numbers. So you don't have to say my child can add single digit numbers and 2-digit numbers. You can just say my child, knows how to add 2-digit numbers. So you don't have to take every little step in a particular area. Okay, and you want to try and demonstrate progress. And maybe some people might think this is too much for me, but this is actually good for your records as well. Because it's a progress report, you want to describe what your child's skill is. You don't want to say something like Susie was introduced to reading, or you don't want to say something like Johnny learned to write. Instead, how about Johnny writes a complete sentence using a subject and a verb with correct punctuation and capitalization. Simple, but now I know that Johnny can write a sentence and it's a decent sentence. So something like that, that's describing more his skill. And that leaves you knowing, my son can do this. So here are some terms. And again, don't write this down. This is all in an article that we have under resources, but terms for language arts could be, or phrases could be, he reads words with long vowels, or he recalls details of a story to answer who, what, where, and when questions. He identifies prepositional phrases in a sentence. Things like he can alphabetize, blah, blah, blah. He can spell 2-syllable words. He can compare actions of let's think of someone who's a middle schooler. He can compare and contrast the actions of the antagonist and the protagonist in a story, or something like that. For social studies and science, you can, if you're doing unit study, you can consider listing the unit or the area study, and then what the child learned. And I gave you an example of that for the solar system. You could do that for any, if you studied plants, he can describe the water cycle. Or if you studied, in geography, the child can name all 50 states and the capital cities of each state. He can list the characteristics of a mammal and name at least 5 different mammals. You guys are probably doing these things and you don't realize, hey, I can put this down in my progress report. For math, if he can skip count 2 by 2, 3, 5, and 10, he tells time to the half hour. He can put together a graph. He can identify this. He can solve. He can regroup. He can multiply. He can measure to the quarter of an inch or something like that. These are things that your child is doing because you've been working on them. The law also says to provide work samples and representative tests. So what you have, you can just make a photocopy. When someone taught me how to do written reports, they told me don't, kind of cover up the name of the curriculum, because they don't need to know that. So that's up to you. If you miss it, it's okay. For each subject area, you could include, if you want to, a beginning and an end assignment. For example, in writing, especially if you're working on penmanship, how neat to know that your child wrote like this, and it's kind of hard to read, but now it's very legible. Or a math page showing what he's able to do in the beginning of the year and now in the end of the year. Or even more simply, just make a copy of the final exam for a subject and send that in as a representative sample of a test or of a work. Then finally, it's a good idea to ask a good friend, to proofread your written evaluation for spelling errors, any grammar, for clarity, because we all miss something. Include a cover letter identifying your child, name, address, phone number, birth date, grade for the school year and the grade for the next school year. Because some families choose to hold their kids back so that you can let the school know that I'm holding my child back for 1 year. Otherwise, they would expect something for the next year. And remember to include a statement requesting all communication be done in writing. It's so easy now for people to just do phone calls or emails, and emails are okay because you can, if you keep that email, you have a trace, you can trace it. But phone calls, sometimes you think, oh, it's going to be real quick, but it gets on and it gets more complicated. So it's best to have your communication in writing. I'm not saying this to scare you, but you know, if somebody isn't happy with something from the school and they just keep on after you, it just makes life easier if everything is in writing. And then for your, just to make sure the report gets received, you would like, it's good to send the report certified and return receipt requested so that you know that it was received and signed and they have it with them. Writing an evaluation, sometimes we think it's time consuming, a little bit difficult, but it really doesn't have to be, especially if we're keeping good records, you know, during the course of the year. I'll go back to unit studies again. When you do a unit study, you finish a unit study, and so you can just write a couple of statements, what your child was able to do, and keep it in your records. You go on to the next unit and you'll do the same thing. And at the end of the year, if you're doing a written evaluation, you'll just say, we did some studies on mammals, and what he can do about mammals. Or, you know, the solar system, blank, 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 what he learned about the solar system. Or if you want to, you can put it according to the subject area. So if you're keeping good records, simple records, you know, writing an evaluation really won't be that difficult. And it'll get you into the habit because it's going to become more vital, important, demanding, especially as the child progresses into upper grades. Okay. So any questions, please? We all got it. Anybody opting for testing, preferring to do testing? You're going to do testing. How old are your kiddos? Oh, where did she go? Oh, there you go.
My son is in 8th grade.
Okay. So you're required to do testing.
Yes. So we'll probably do the SAT, but I had the question if you know if the SSAT counts as well, or is that a different category of testing?
That's a different category.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
So both of my children are diagnosed with autism, and I'm wondering, right now, my daughter is, I don't have to worry about her yet. She just turned 5, but my son is in 1st grade. And so, I mean, I think it's okay. I'll just do what I did last year and write a,
Written eval.
yes, with some copies of work, which is okay. I think considering COVID and everything that's happened, I think he's still on par. I mean, we've had him tested, you know, for disabilities and IQ and so forth. And she said that he's okay, he's sort of right there in the bottom end of the average. But I'm just wondering, as I progress, you know, I haven't said anything to the school, and I am worried about testing, and that's why I don't want to do it in terms of the standardized testing. But I know in 2 years I'm going to have to face that. But I'm just wondering, and I'm keeping really, really good notes, and I have all the diagnoses if it comes up, you know. But I'm just wondering if that's something that is standardized, how they handle that. If a developmentally disabled child, you know, they can't, you know, the parent wants to homeschool them, but they're not going to necessarily be able to meet maybe the average child's.
Yeah. And so what happened, a lot of times I know of a situation where the principal was insistent that this family have their son tested. And the mom said, and the principal was familiar with this mother, because she had other children who were homeschooled, and the mom sent in the report. So the principal knew this family. And the mom explained that my child is not a good test taker. He gets very anxious about taking tests, but the principal insisted that the child be tested. Unfortunately, I get the sense from the school, and don't quote me like this is how everybody else is, but Laura, you can vouch for me. I get the sense that the schools like numbers. They want to close their books. Remember, Laura, when we went on that work group, they wanted to know how many, so they could close their books and say at the end of the year there were this many students, and the beginning of the year there were this many students. So there's a sense of record keeping that, and they're required to do, so that they have that hanging over them. That being said, you can always talk to the principal and see if another test could be administered, or can they continue to do the written evaluation. Meanwhile, go and talk to these testing services, call them up and see, are any of these tests more friendly for kids who are on the spectrum, and see if any give and take can be on that. If you're a member of Homeschool Legal Defense Association, you might be able to get some consult there. You have to be a member to actually talk to one of the consultants to get that, so you can do that. But it's good that you're thinking ahead so that you can prepare your child, even if it means that you might have to do some type of testing so that he becomes familiar with that environment. There's also a lady, I guess she's here this week even, she's called Sarah, can't remember her last name. Sarah Obrist. We call her the testing lady.
Mhm.
But she does testing, and she'll actually do the wide range achievement test. So she's actually doing psychology tests, more like, I guess they're either their achievement or aptitude tests, but that would be another resource to look into. And she seems to come around this time every year. So,
Okay.
thank
you.
Any other questions? Anybody else doing? So if you do have your child in grades 3, 5, 8, and 10, you have to do testing. And if you are interested in the paper booklet test rather than the online one, and you want to do Bob Jones, you want to do the SAT 10, you're going to have to look into that pretty quickly because they do have deadlines for that. If you choose the California Achievement Test, and that one's a time test, I believe we said, but a parent can do it. So there's a lot of options, and I hope one of them fits your needs. Back in our day, we didn't have these many options, did we, Laura? We didn't have many options for curricula either. So sometimes that made life easier rather than choosing from a plethora of who knows what. So, okay.
So I wanted to just, with the autism, so
Uh-huh.
Otis is autistic. He's gonna be 16.
Mm-hmm.
He was diagnosed kind of late on the autism spectrum, but he has a low cognitive ability. So when they used to do like the battery tests in elementary, man, he was like learning at he was learning a little bit below his grade level. But I feel like when he got to middle school, like he's at like a second, third grade level right now. So I did the Iowa assessment a paper book for him. And then I did my other kids with Sarah because it was our
Oh, okay.
first year. I did the wide range.
Uh-huh.
Could have actually done the autism one with her, but anyway, I'm totally new to this, but yeah, it gets a little bit tricky when they get older because I mean he's 16 and he's learning, but his cognitive level will only, that's his ability, is that
Yeah.
second grade,
Yeah.
third grade level.
Yeah.
So that's why testing does get a little tricky. It's not like black and white. You know, they
Yeah.
learn all different. So
And the gap, and so the gap
the gap.
widens. And
Yeah.
then I know a family whose son is on the spectrum also, and her focus is now more on, he's very involved, so her focus is more on life skills. And
Yeah.
you, parent, need to determine at what point to
Mhm.
focus on those things, because you know, what's the use of the test scores?
Right.
What's the use of testing him? I want my child to be able to, know how to take care of himself in the daily activities of daily living. I want him to be able to catch a bus, make some simple change. Those life skills are much more important than knowing the, the names of the presidents in order, or the sequence of history events or something like that. Unless he has, these characteristics where he has good memory on some things. But that's where you and the parent have to be the advocate for
And it is a hard pill to swallow, especially when you're very education academic driven and you're like, it was hard for me, but I just, we just got to move where he's at now. And
Right.
yeah, so.
Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, if you have questions that come to mind, don't hesitate to email Cho at info@Christian Homeschoolers of Hawaii, and we'll try and answer your questions. Like I said, we'll put up the recording in a couple of days because I know some people missed joining the meeting. And then we will be having the article about standardized tests. It's actually online. It's on our website already. We have the test comparison chart up there as well. And if you click on the name of the testing service, it'll link you to them, so you can go to their website directly. What else did I let you know? If you have high schoolers, we are going to be having a high school session in a couple of months. We're kind of hoping that we can do it face-to-face. The high school sessions take longer than an evening. There's a lot to cover for high school. So when we've done it face-to-face, it was like a 4-hour thing. And when we've done it on Zoom, I think we did it over a period of 3 or 4 sessions. So it's a lot more information to cover. And then we will do, we'll do beginning homeschooling again later on in the year, probably in the summer sometime. If you need a refresher, those things are up on our website too. Okay, if there's no other questions, thank you for joining us. And Laura, do you want to have anything to add?
Yeah, just that I know after I received my, test scores, I went ahead and tested them every year, even from, I think it was first grade on, because I figured you may as well, my kids, I just felt like they should get used to taking this test at the end of every school year. And it wasn't a big deal because they knew what was coming. Every year they did the same thing. So it, it wasn't that like freak out. Oh no, we're going to do this big thing. And just to use that as your maybe as a guide to a degree for next year on what you need to focus on, what may be helpful to kind of hone in on for, the next school year. And at the same time, don't use it as such a measure for yourself that you just bomb the year. You know what I mean? And God is gracious. At times, your family may have a circumstance that you went through, or you learned about, something that your child is facing. Maybe like you're on your child is on the spectrum, you didn't know it, or so on. But just give yourself grace and pray a lot. God is so
I do
faithful.
have a question.
Mhm.
So like we've been with classical conversations. That's where I started last school year. But as far as when they do the testing, the standardized testing, like the social, because with CC the history is more like those 24 weeks of the history sentence that you're learning, and should I be like supplementing because they won't ask the same questions that I'm teaching them, or should I just get a SAT booklet first and see what the questions will ask my child? Sorry.
You won't be able to see the test ahead of time. Are there any CC people viewing the video? Okay, can you address your question on that? Maybe you can tell us how old your kids are too.
I'm sorry, I'm doing CC, but I cannot answer that question. That's a really good question that I will probably have to think about if we continue on, but we're sort of new to this.
How old
So,
are your children in CC?
8th grade. So we did 7th and currently in 8th grade. So
You didn't start CC from the beginning.
no.
Okay. So has it been a challenge to enter at that level?
No, it's been wonderful.
Good.
Mostly because of the director that we had made the transition really easy for my child.
Okay.
So Jennifer, I understand what you're asking as far as, because you're on this path as far as what you're learning at this particular time through this curriculum, but yet the school, average school system is on a different maybe subject or time frame in what they're introducing certain periods during the high school years, junior high, and so on. I wouldn't worry about it.
Mhm.
I would just keep on going and doing what's working for you, and that you're seeing your child making some progress. And I just love the way Classical Conversations uses music and all these other methods to help retain information. But there's so much that you can go and get as far as if they need to know something at a certain time. So as far as these standardized tests, okay, they're testing how much can you memorize for this certain period about this particular subject. Is that I've just come to the conclusion that you need to learn to think. Can you think?
So
that's the key to me.
Yeah, like Classical Conversations, they read a lot. There's a lot
Which is
of
good.
foundational, the biblical views. So it's like, how do you incorporate that in standardized testing? Like, and then I'm like, I know I had a Becca curriculum where they were learning American government that I had from another homeschool mom. She had generously passed down to me. So that had things about limited government, about the Puritans, about those things. And then I was like, but then I don't want to overwhelm my kids with too much one subject, and
Right.
I'll figure it out. I mean, lots of prayers, lots of on my knees.
Yeah.
Your question is not unusual, because I know someone who did CC, and I think it was just her personality on top of CC, and she was a director. But on top of that, I mean, she really bought into CC, and yet I think in her insecurities, she joined a co-op and got all this other stuff, and it was just too much.
Yeah.
I think you need to, if you're whatever curriculum you use, you need to buy into it. And what I mean by that is you need to believe that this is what the Lord has directed you to use, and you're gonna stick with it. So
Yeah.
your question about do I supplement? Well, and if you're learning, I don't know what happens in each age group of CC, but someone told me the other day that, yeah, they don't do any science and they don't do any social studies. They just do, and her son is in challenge already. So he hasn't been exposed. They haven't done much science. But, you know, you can find good books for your child to read, which is very enriching, because you have, you don't want to overwhelm yourself with what you're supposed to be, you know, you're teaching. So if I don't know if CC does a cycle in terms of a history thing, but you know, if you're in this time period, read historical narratives, biographies of people in that time period, and or you know, just read different genre on different subjects as well, and then at least you'll be brought in. You know, it's a good liberal arts. By liberal arts, I don't mean secular liberalism kind of thing, but liberal in terms of abroad is really a wonderful way for knowledge, because that makes your child be able to talk to so many different people, because he's not only learning about one thing. You know, he's broadened his knowledge base to be able to carry on conversations with people, different people of different ages, different skills, knowledge bases, and things like that. So, you know, the main thing is don't overwhelm yourself. You really need to be comfortable and confident in the curriculum that the Lord has chosen. And if you, you know, I'm sure we all pray about what we're going to use. So we need to know that's what we have, and we need to stick it through. And even if it's not working, we need to stick with it for a while to make sure that we get past some of the humps and bumps, and then see how things pan out. There might come a time where the curriculum's not working and we have to look at something else, but we don't want to keep on throwing in the towel too early, because that's really disruptive for your child, you know, because then he's starting over again, or just getting a sense of.
Yeah, it's just the ages of my kids is, so I have a 9-year-old, which she's in 3rd grade. So we do Abeka, and I like Abeka with the reading, but we also do this because CC is mostly just the memory work for that age, the 9-year-old age. And then the math is just been like teaching textbooks or math UC, and then, but like you said, you just gotta stick it out. I guess my mind is just thinking like meeting the qualifications of the DOE, or like the standard. I guess that's my thinking is, am I doing enough? Or
And I think you have to know that because CC doesn't follow the conventional core knowledge sequence, your child may not do as well. And so you just have to accept that, and just.
So the goal should be to obviously educate your child as broadly as you can, teach them to think, and keep that love for learning intact as much as possible. And the rest of the, you know, whether they score in the 90s or whatever, I mean, what does that really mean in the end, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's looking at it and saying, oh, your child scored in the 90s, so therefore, you know, da 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 da. No, it's not taking you anywhere.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
I guess you can get caught up in that.
You can. Yep. I remember feeling like that.
And ask yourself, who am I trying to please? Am I trying to please the Lord, or am I trying to please?
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
testing is going to keep changing as
Yeah.
new social norms change. Then
Yeah.
the test is going to reflect the change that's taking place in the society. And do we want to actually go in that direction, learning about these, you know, different kinds of social changes? Then that's where you have to draw the line and say, I don't, you know, you pray, make that decision.
Now we
So,
talked about, what happens when your child doesn't score well in the test. I want to go on the other side too, when your child scores really high, like you have a third grader and his grade equivalent is 12th grade, or he, okay, sorry to pop your balloon, but it really doesn't mean anything. So that's why, you need to talk to the testing service consultants to help you understand the test scores.
The results.
Yeah, what the results mean. They're gonna, I think they have percentile ranks, and they do this bar thing. And I remember that if your child kind of clustered, like here, the bar kind of in each subject area just kind of clustered around here, that was good. Even though it wasn't way up here, if it was all clustered in the same place, that was good. But if they clustered here, but there was one like that was way low, then that might be something to be concerned about. So that's what we talked about, strengths and weaknesses, that might be something you need to change the curriculum or the focus, or maybe he was sick that day when that particular subtest was given. So, make use of the consultants. That's what they're there for, to help you. By the consultants, I mean the testing service people, to help you understand your test scores. Because, we don't want to get deflated because our children did not score well, but we don't want to get inflated when we see these, wow, because it doesn't necessarily say very much either.
And just remember that you have to fall below the 33rd percentile mark in order for the schools to start asking you about, hey, what are we going to do to remediate this situation? And your child's not doing well, and so on. I mean, that's a struggling student, and I'm sure you would know it by all indications throughout the year. But that's really, I mean, a third, the 33rd percentile, that's really low. So if you're being diligent and you've got other people around you too to help you sort of assess if you've got things going on that you're not sure about. I mean, you can call Cho. It's highly unlikely that you're going to fall below that third. And I mean, if you're okay, so when you're putting your child, when you're actually submitting your notice of intent, if you feel like your child is just not at maybe grade level or so on, keep them in the grade level below, and you can skip a year in the future. So for us, I mean, this was at the very beginning. We had our son in the grade level that reflected his age, the average and so on. But then we ended up skipping 7th grade because by the time we got there, we knew he could do 8th grade work. So we just ended up skipping a year. But if you have any kind of a feeling that your child's not doing well, then hold them back on the piece of paper that you're submitting to the school. Does that make sense? To give yourself some cushion. So.
And the school might fight you, but it's your right.
I mean, I have one more. I know you had suggested, Jan, about testing, like to keep it consistent, using the same test to monitor the kids. Okay. So I did the rat with them. He was 2nd grade and 6th grader, but is it okay? I'm not going to go with the testing lady because it was a bit pricey.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Is it okay if I would just go with like the Stanford?
It's just a recommendation. The rat is going to be very different from
I didn't really know how to read it.
10 or the Iowa, but it's just something to think about. If you use the same test every year, your same not testing service, but same test, it allows you to compare the progress. But if you have to switch, you switch, and that's okay. It's not end of the world, deal killer or anything. It's just a recommendation so that you can look. So then the following year you continue. And sometimes things happen. You miss the deadline for testing, or you're going to be away, you can't test, or something happened in your family and you can't do the testing, or it looks like a lot of these places are doing online. And I sorry I didn't research, but I actually, when I talked to the BJU people, it was kind of early in the morning that they would test. I don't thinking, oh, okay. So yeah. But they might have things later in the day too, because when you think about the time difference for the East Coast, I don't know if they have proctors on the West Coast for other areas, but when they go on daylight saving time next week, it's going to be 6 hours difference between the East Coast. That's a big difference. We're getting up and they're having lunch, and we get our day going and they're ready to go home. So I just want to leave you with, I don't want to think that we left God out of this, because he's the one over all of this. Okay. So, just it's trusting and praying him. He's the God of the covenant who's chosen you. And he's going to protect you, provide for you, care for you. Doesn't mean it won't be without some ups and downs, but he's there regardless of your situation, and he's working to mold you to be more like our Savior Jesus Christ. And we're home educating our children because we want to raise them up in the Lord, but we know very well that God is working and doing his sanctifying work in us as we are teaching our children, because there's times when we are tired, our attitudes aren't always pleasant, mama always ain't happy, the house is a mess, there's laundry, there's cooking, there's shopping, it doesn't end. But God is the one who is with us, and he'll uphold us and take you through. And so that when you come old like me, you can just stay home. And I'm going to say my favorite thing. What do I do, Laura? I watch soap operas and eat chocolate. I know. That's what I tell everybody.
Enjoy your children. I mean, the house can be dirty. Shopping can go on later. But if you have those moments with your kids, that, teachable moments, especially, take advantage of it, because it does go quick, even though you feel like every day is so long. Good rest is very necessary. So just to encourage you ladies that God is faithful, and in all things, pray about all things. So God bless you.
My daughter started something. She both homeschools and works, but she started doing writing a blessing from the Lord every day. I don't know how she finds time to do this, but she sets a time every day. She takes a piece of paper, like an origami paper, and she'll write a blessing from the Lord, and she folds it into an iris. So she would get all these irises, open them up, and so she could just be reminded of God's grace and mercy.
June, I was just gonna ask you if your kids or Laura too, if any of your kids homeschool.
My
nice, great.
five of them are being homeschooled. 6 of them are being homeschooled. I have a total of 11 right now. So yeah. But it's been, some have chosen private school, and then homeschooling, public school for one son, and it's been a real variety pack. But just trying to encourage them in whatever way we can, that they stay involved and just be teaching, God's principles, no matter what school they're in. But yeah. But God bless, ladies. Keeping you in prayer. Okay.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for signing up. And if you don't subscribe to the Cho newsletter, please do. If you follow us on Facebook, please do. We're there to encourage you. We're going to be putting out something in a couple of weeks. There's going to be another homeschool summit. I don't know if any of you have joined. We've been doing it for a couple of years. We team up with the homeschool organization in Colorado, and we do, they call them homeschool summits. We've had things on choosing curriculum or curriculum choices. And this one is going to be on the future. So how we prepare our children for the future, and which is very timely when you think about all the things that are happening. I mean, it's crazy. But you know, God's in control, and how do we submit to what's to the Lord and still honor and glorify him in light of all the things that are happening. So if you follow us on Facebook or you get our emails, then you'll hear about this event that's coming up. It's a week-long event. The first week, April 4th through 8th. It's free, but if you buy something, if you register and pay for it, you can listen to it, you know, 24 hours or forever. If you don't purchase, then it's good for the 24 hours. But you know, Colorado is going to be, I think they're using Central Time, so I think it's going to be 5 hours ahead of us. So they'll start at 9, so it's our 4 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, so I don't normally listen at 4 o'clock. So I normally will purchase it and be able to look at it later on. But just keep an eye open for, you know, our advertisements that'll be coming out in the next week. Okay. All right. Thank you. Good night. Thank you for coming. Hope it was helpful.